Welcome to Domestic Violence Impacting the Workplace, a CSAP presentation offered in cooperation with the Colorado Department of Human Services Domestic Violence Program in order to provide information to all state employees on the universal policy addressing workplace violence, including domestic violence impacting the workplace. The goal of this presentation is to equip you to understand the universal policy to address workplace violence, including domestic violence affecting the workplace, identify how domestic violence affects workplaces, recognize people surviving or engaging in domestic violence, respond to domestic violence in the workplace, access resources and referrals. We appreciate your attention to the valuable information presented throughout the entire presentation. Universal policies are offered to state agencies and their employees in an effort to point out expectations, rights, and responsibilities of employees. The universal policy to address workplace violence, including domestic violence affecting the workplace, highlights workplace violence, including domestic violence impacting the work environment. You can click on the link or the document image to access the actual policy document. Please check with your employer for further or more detailed policy, practices, and protocols created to address violence impacting your specific workplace. The Universal Policy document indicates that the state does not tolerate violent behavior or the threat of violent behavior by anyone towards state employees, members of the public, state property, or facilities. Universal Policy to Address Workplace Violence, including Domestic Violence Affecting the Workplace, 2009, page 1. You may be wondering why there is a universal policy addressing domestic violence. Unfortunately, domestic violence affects people working for the state, both directly and indirectly. Domestic violence occurs at such a high rate in the United States that it is tracked by the Centers for Disease Control as a public health issue. Domestic violence is used by and against people of all genders, ages, and backgrounds. Many children will witness acts of domestic violence in their homes. The state of Colorado is committed to providing a safe work environment for all of its employees. Defining domestic violence includes naming the behaviors, identifying the purpose of the behaviors, and identifying the relationship between the person using the behavior and the person being targeted. Within the universal policy, domestic violence is defined as an act or threatened act of violence against any person or property, including an animal, when used as a method of coercion, control, punishment, intimidation, or revenge, directed against a person with whom the perpetrator is or has been involved in an intimate relationship, and includes stalking. People using domestic violence engage in a variety of tactics over time to gain power and control over a current or former intimate partner. This pattern of coercive control may include some, most, or all of the tactic types listed in the wedges of the power and control wheel. Regardless of the exact behavior, the purpose remains the same: for the person using abuse to gain power over decisions within the relationship and to control aspects of their partner's life. When a survivor tries to resist their partner's abuse, the abusive partner may say things like, "If you were a better partner, I wouldn't have to do those things." Or, "You're being too sensitive and making a big deal out of nothing." Or simply, "No one will believe you." Another important part of defining domestic violence is noting that it is a pattern of abuse that is used by someone against their current or former intimate partner. Intimate partner includes people who are or have been married, in a civil union, dating, or who have a child together. An intimate relationship can be a heterosexual or a same-sex or same-gender relationship. Because domestic violence is specific to these forms of intimate or romantic relationships, domestic violence is not the right term for abusive behaviors between children, parents, housemates, siblings, or abuse conducted by a caregiver. Domestic violence is prevalent among employees in the United States. More than 40% of working adults in a national phone survey stated that domestic violence had directly or indirectly affected their workplace. We now know that domestic violence occurs among state employees, but why is this an important workplace matter? One reason is that domestic violence impacts workers' health and their well-being. The stress of living with and surviving abuse affects one's physical and mental health. While in the past domestic violence was considered a family problem, we now know it is a social and public health issue. As state employees, we have a responsibility to support workers who may be managing the safety and well-being impacts of domestic violence. Domestic violence is also a security concern in the workplace. The predictability of a survivor's work location and schedule makes it easy for their abuser to locate them at their job site. Research with people who have survived domestic violence reveals that for 2/3 of the survivors, the abuse included their abusive partner going to their workplace. We also know that for women in the U.S., domestic violence homicide is the leading cause of death at a workplace. Domestic violence is a performance and productivity concern. For employees who are surviving domestic violence, their performance and productivity may be impacted if they use leave due to stress or injuries, are interrupted by excessive calls from their partner, are distracted on the job. Likewise, employees who choose to use abusive behavior may undermine their own performance and productivity by using work resources to harass or monitor their partner, interrupting their work to monitor their partner, being distracted on the job. Many abusive behaviors, such as isolation, harassment, economic control, or intimidation, include specific employment-related tactics. Take a moment to review these forms of abuse and consider how such actions can affect an employee and their workplace. Another survey of people surviving domestic violence found that perpetrators interfered with victims' work duties in 4 primary ways: by showing up at the survivor's work, by making harassing phone calls to victims and to victim supervisors, by stalking the survivors while they were at work, and by engaging in a variety of other sabotaging tactics such as damaging transportation and work clothing. A survey of self-reported behavior by people engaging in domestic violence found that these people used their own work time to contact their partner in order to continue their abusive tactics. Also, more than 20% of these people who were engaging in domestic violence during work hours reported that someone at their job knew about their abusive behaviors. A person of any gender, age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, faith background, or economic or educational status can be targeted. Survivors are from all backgrounds. Survivors are the expert on what type of assistance, if any, is likely to be useful. Survivors may not identify with the term domestic violence. It may be that relationship difficulties or stress at home is a more comfortable way to talk about their experiences. A person of any gender, age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, faith background, or economic or educational status can be using abusive behavior. People engaged in abuse are from all backgrounds. People who use abusive behaviors feel entitled to control their partner or ex-partner. Using abusive behavior is not a result of losing control, but is a way of maintaining control. People who use abuse often minimize and deny the harm they cause and blame other people or outside events for their actions. They may say things like, "You're making a big deal out of nothing." "I didn't scare you. That didn't hurt. You're being dramatic." "If you had done things the right way, I wouldn't have gotten mad." "You know I had a tough day, so just give me a break." "I was drunk, I was high, so just give me a break." If you recognize your own behavior in this description, there are resources to assist you in making changes that increase the safety and well-being of your children, partner, self, and coworkers. Please click on the link or call 855-978-2638. As a colleague or coworker, you may see several indicators that an employee is concerned about violence in their relationship. Some indicators that a person may be surviving domestic violence include reduced productivity or a preoccupation with breaks, or chronic tardiness or absenteeism. In addition to indicators noted on this slide, as a coworker, you may simply experience a gut feeling that something isn't right. One CDHS employee who survived domestic violence described her experience like this. I was afraid of anyone at work discovering the life I lived, as I did not want it to change their perspective of me. I was well respected and liked. Eventually, my attendance at work began to go downhill, as there were many days I was physically, emotionally, and mentally exhausted. If you see concerning signs or get a worried gut feeling about a coworker, there are helpful ways to respond to that coworker. It is your place to bring up your concerns if you feel that the workplace is being affected or if you are worried for the coworker's well-being. So how would you bring up your concerns? To begin with, do plan what you want to say and a convenient time and private place to talk. Start by believing that no one deserves abuse. Don't try to find flaws or tell your coworker how to fix the issue. Do not blame the victim or negatively label their partner. Don't jump to solutions. Ask what might help. And remember, the solution of leaving is not always safe. When it comes to domestic violence, leaving does not equal safety. Our own discomfort at seeing someone being degraded and harmed can lead us to seek a fix to the abuse. However, leaving a household or relationship can escalate a domestic violence survivor's level of danger. Ending an abusive relationship is a risky step for a survivor because it is a direct challenge to an abuser's power. An abuser's violence often escalates after the partner leaves the relationship, putting the survivor and any children in their family in greater danger. As State of Colorado employees, we cannot ignore or condone violent, threatening, harassing, or intimidating behaviors. Therefore, here are some suggestions for what you could say to a coworker to start a conversation. Take a minute to see which of these phrases would feel most comfortable for you to say. If you are supervising someone who you think may be surviving domestic violence, here are some additional ways for you to open a conversation. The Department of Human Resources, a division of the Department of Personnel and Administration, has created a technical guide to assist agencies in developing their own policies, protocols, and response to workplace violence, including domestic violence impacting the workplace. Click on the technical guide link on this slide to access workplace safety assessment guidance, a sample workplace violence incident report, and a violence aftermath plan. Creating an open-door policy for reporting workplace violence can be a primary factor in preventing additional violence. An open-door policy can help employees feel comfortable reporting violence that they have witnessed, experienced, or heard about in the workplace or impacting the workplace. State agency workplaces are also encouraged to offer resources to those who have experienced domestic violence, as well as to those who have perpetrated domestic violence. CSAP, or Internal Employee Assistance Program, is a primary resource for employees in need of support and resources. In the following slides, you'll receive information about resources and strategies to address domestic violence impacting the workplace. Regardless of where in Colorado you live or work, there are resources available to support people who are surviving domestic violence and to help with behavior change for people who are engaging in domestic violence. Click on the image of the Domestic Violence Resource Guide for State of Colorado employees to be linked to the complete resource listings. The Colorado State Employee Assistance Program, known as CSAP, is available to all state employees and has 9 offices around the state of Colorado. Employee assistance programs like CSAP are offered by many employers in an effort to support the well-being of employees and the workplace. Such programs typically provide short-term counseling, referrals and resources, as well as training and organizational development services. Your EAP program, CSAP, can assist both survivors and perpetrators of domestic violence. In addition, CSAP can provide consultation to supervisors or managers who are concerned about an employee. CSAP counseling and consultation services are available to all State of Colorado employees at no cost. These services are also confidential. To set up an appointment with a CSAP counselor, call 303-866-4314 or 1-800-821-8154. If you have not previously worked with a CSAP counselor, allow 5 to 10 minutes of uninterrupted time to complete an initial phone intake. You can also click on the CSAP logo to be taken to their webpage. Supervisors can play an important role in promoting a safe and productive work environment. Consider putting up posters that remind all workers that no one deserves to be mistreated. And if you learn about inappropriate behavior by an employee, make sure you record the behavior and address it with the employee during routine supervision and at performance evaluations. All workers can promote a healthy work environment by letting peers know that disrespectful comments of any type are not welcomed. Speaking up makes a difference. We will now close this training with another quote from a CDHS employee who survived domestic violence. They said, "My employer and those I worked with were a great support once my story came to light. I truly believe that along with my family, my employer, and my job tasks themselves helped me move forward out of those dark periods I experienced, and gave me incentive and drive to push towards a brighter future I knew was awaiting me and my children." As reflected in this survivor quote, people experiencing domestic violence can and do find safety and well-being, especially when the people around them are informed and able to offer useful resources. Here are links to the resources discussed in this training module. Click on the blue lettering to be directed to the resource. Here are additional websites that may be of interest if you want to learn more. And finally, some additional ways to be involved in addressing domestic violence. This concludes the training.